Hello to all the debt warriors listening, and welcome back to another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. I'm your host, Katie Fada. Generational wealth refers to any kind of asset that families pass down to their children or grandchildren, whether in the form of cash, investment funds, stocks and bonds, properties, or even entire companies. Don't have any of these things saved for your family? No need to panic, because today I'll be joined by Andy Hill and we'll be teaching you how to build generational wealth for your family. Andy's website, marriagekidsandmoney.com, provides a plethora of topics ranging from how to achieve financial independence for your young family to how to strengthen your marriage by getting on the same page about money. Andy also hosts the Marriage, Kids, and Money podcast, which provides people with easy to understand information and actionable takeaways you can use to give your family the life they deserve. Andy and I will be discussing the role of financial literacy in building generational wealth, how investing in your child's education builds generational wealth, how you pass on your family's generational wealth, and much more. Now let's get to my interview with Andy. Hi, Andy. Thanks for being on the podcast today.
Hi, Katie. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk about generational wealth today. We haven't had this topic on the podcast yet, and I know that you're an expert, so let's get started.
All right.
So I think to get started, can you just maybe describe what is generational wealth for people who aren't exactly sure?
Sure. I would say generational wealth it's improving your financial knowledge and building your own personal assets so that you can, in turn, improve the financial knowledge and assets of your children, and then their children, and so on and so on.
Yeah, the definition kind of answers my next question, but why else do you think building generational wealth is important?
Yeah, I think it's important because a lot of people didn't grow up with, sort of the adequate financial knowledge or privileges, really, that a lot of people have. So the lack of that knowledge and those privileges made it difficult for them to advance in this world and find their own version of happiness. So with the right values, I believe more financial knowledge and privileges, that can allow a person to give their family a better life in this world that we have. And it can be a blessing, for our society and our country and the world in general, if those values that they have put service and giving in high regard.
Yeah. And, finances and money are so hard to talk about with your family, and bringing it up, it is a hard subject to talk about. So how would you recommend going about bringing up building generational wealth for your family?
Yeah, if you were a young parent like me, I would say a great place to start is you as the example, because I say a lot of things sometimes, and my kids don't seem to do what I say. But when I do the things, they seem to follow more in my example, especially with the negative things and the positive things. But with regard to generational wealth, we started early with our kids, letting them know that contribution is important. That's contributing here at the house, contributing in your community, contributing at school, and with that contribution, you get a reward, And so for them here at the house, we say, hey, pitch in by cleaning up, whether it's cleaning your room, doing laundry, sweeping, vacuuming, things like that, and you'll get a financial reward for that. So we're trying to correlate, hey, contributing has some sort of benefit with it. And then once we put money in their hands, that's when the real lessons start to happen about how they can use that money and be good stewards of it. So we talk about investing with them. We talk about saving with them. We talk about giving with them. We talk about smart spending with them. And with all those topics, they all land in different digital buckets for them. So we end up having conversations about each one of those things and how that can improve their lives over time. And yes, my kids are still young. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old, but over time, those conversations start to become more clear, become more evident that, okay, with a little bit of my money, it's important to give some of it. With a little bit of my money, it's important to invest some of it. With a little bit of my money, it's important to save some of it. And yeah, with most of it, we can go out and have some fun and buy toys and slime and all sorts of good stuff. But if we do those three things in a micro way each time we get some money, that's a pretty good start with creating generational wealth and just having a good life.
Yeah, I can imagine with kids, it's hard to teach them about savings and stuff because they just want to buy those toys and such.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I can imagine. But, it's good to teach them firsthand, give them the chores and reward them so they understand the value of money. So I think that's great. So, yeah, like we kind of said, building generational wealth is not an easy task when you're first starting out. So what are the first steps parents can take to build generational wealth for their family's future?
Yeah, I think the conversation around generational wealth becomes more along the lines of what assets am I leaving them or how much money am I going to give them? But really, I think that it needs to go back more towards the knowledge that they get and the example that you're leaving them. So I would say start with knowledge first. If you think wealth is about, hey, making sure your family is secure and you're able to do work that you love, then start by leading with that example and then showing them how. Those can start with everyday lessons. So, hey, if we got young kids, we're in the store and we see things on the shelves and we want all of those things. Maybe we have some conversations about the prices of those things and and conversations around, hey, we can buy that, but then we're not able to do this thing. So the choices that go into holding yourself back when you might want something, but you don't have the money for it, or you have allocated that money for other things like, hey, it's important for us to go on a vacation this month, or it's important for us to give to this cause that we talked about. So we don't necessarily have money to buy all of the toys right now, but over time we can. So I think having those conversations, those everyday kind of conversations is a great place to start, just filling them up with the knowledge that they need to be financially empowered.
Yeah. And that knowledge is financial literacy and teaching them different aspects of financial literacy because they might not get it in school depending where they live. So you are your child's first financial teacher too.
Absolutely.
So I think that, so what kind of role do you think financial literacy plays in generational wealth?
I think it's key. I think it is the wealth really at the end of the day. I think you could give somebody, I know that both you and I know that statistic of, hey, give somebody a bunch of money. 70% of it might be gone by the time the next generation comes around, and then 90% after that. I mean, that's really some scary statistics around wealthy families out there. So, and I think what's maybe missing from some of that is the knowledge of how to protect it. So it makes sense, if somebody were to not be that great with money, but then they won a $10 million lottery. I mean, what do you think is going to happen? And what does happen? Yeah, I mean, we've all hear the stories about how it just goes away because we don't know how to use it. And it makes sense. If I were to get into a car and somebody said, drive this car, and I I had no knowledge of how to drive a car, how successful am I going to be? So I think it's super important for us to equip our children and young adults as they grow into adulthood with the knowledge of how to be financially empowered, how to be financially literate so that they can do right by their money and build that generational wealth.
Right. And you want to keep building it. You don't want to destroy it. I think that's such a good point you brought up about wealthy families. They might have this generational wealth, but if they don't teach their children what to do with it, it's just going to get destroyed.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good point to bring up. And, investing is a great way to build generational wealth, and it's a common way families will do it. So what do you think the best investments for building generational wealth are?
Well, if you have the opportunity to help your kids go off to college or have that education, whatever that is, whether that's technical school, community college, university, however you decide, further education is a great place to start is, starting early with investing in a 529. Okay. So you are helping to get to that point where you're able to get that six-figure sum of how much you might need for college. So investing early and often, and Katie, as you and I know, that the earlier you can invest, the more time you put for your investing goals, the better off they'll be. So taking that advantage of that and compound interest can really help you be prepared for the massive cost that we seem to see with college. And yeah, I mean, maybe we're not going to get to that point where we're going to have all of the money that's required for college, but there are things, again, with the knowledge, if you can help them with this, like scholarships, working in high school, working in college, going to community college for the first couple of years. There are ways to hack this whole college experience, but starting with helping kids have enough to continue their education to be able to move on to this world of maybe entrepreneurship or be an employee in this world to create some change. I think that's a great place to start with investing.
Yeah, Andy, I couldn't agree with you more. And I always say, even if you can only invest a small amount, investing something is better than nothing.
Yes.
And, and
investing with a purpose too. I mean,
exactly.
We talk about, hey, everybody should be investing. It's like, I always try to bring it back to for what? What are we investing for? If you're just investing to invest, that's fine. I mean, it's okay. But putting a goal around your investments or even your savings to say, this investment is for my retirement. That way, you don't get confused when you're like, oh, man, the market's down. Maybe I should sell my shares. No. You've got like 30 years until you need that money. You're good. But if you're like, hey, I have an investing goal for college. Okay, that's 20 years away or 18 years away or 15 years away.
Right.
Then you at least know why you're doing it so you don't get your hands in the bucket and try to steal from it, right?
Yeah, definitely give your money a purpose. And I love the 529 account idea. We actually have a blog about that. So I'm going to put that in the link of this or the description of this podcast. But, it is such a good, you're investing for your retirement, you're investing for college. You want to make sure there's a purpose for it. I think that's such a great thing to bring up. And then, a lot of people will invest in their life and their life insurance. Do you think life insurance plays a role in generational wealth?
Sure. Yeah, I would say if you are a parent and people rely on your income to live, I think it's important to have some sort of set of term life insurance. That way you are protecting yourself and your family in case the unexpected happens. And unfortunately, even lately, a lot of people are, dying earlier than they need to.
Yeah.
And that's sad. And if you don't have some income protection for your family, especially if they rely on it, that could definitely derail your plans for generational wealth for sure. I'm not as big of a fan of, universal life insurance or these long-term policies where you're investing for life insurance for forever. It's like it's for a term. It's for a purpose. Once you are investing, once you're investing and taking care of yourself for your retirement and then your kids are off and nobody's relying on your income anymore, you don't really need life insurance as much anymore. Yes, there are certain circumstances, but for most people, a term life policy should be sufficient.
Yeah, that's a good point to bring up too, I think. So I just want to go back to a second about investing in your child's education. How else does that help build generational wealth, do you think?
Yeah, I would say education is cornerstone for a lot of these concepts around generational wealth. The more knowledge that they have, the more personal independence they'll be able to have in the long run, right? So you're not depending on mom and dad, whether it's for the knowledge or for the money. And also, over time, hopefully you become, independent from, your career and needing to, hey, man, if I lose this job, I'm in a really bad way. Over time, you want them to become more independent even from that as well. So they're investing for in themselves, having an emergency fund, taking care of themselves just in case they were to lose those income streams and continuing to diversify those income streams. So I think the more knowledge you have, the more financial literacy you have, that equates to then financial empowerment and allowing you to kind of make choices that are the best for you, the best for your family, and the best for your values overall.
Yeah, I think that's such a good point, especially the financial independence and independence in general. I think a lot of like my generation included, a lot of younger generations, they do rely a lot on their parents for that information still because they don't know it. And I think, having the education is so important these days.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So if they don't have any generational wealth built for them and they want to start building generational wealth, would you recommend they enlist professional help when they start to build this generational wealth for their families?
Sure. You know what? A great place to start is just personal education for yourself. So a lot of people are like, hey, man, I didn't learn this stuff in school.
Yeah.
I got no knowledge. There are so much information out there. Even your podcast we're talking about today, Katie, is a great place for people to learn and educate themselves because, yes, it's important to seek out coaches or help or counselors or financial advisors. Yes, that is a great way to go, but you have to be your own advocate as well. So continuing to make financial education a piece of your life where you're saying, I don't know how to do this. Let me find out how, whether that's at your local library, free podcasts, free blog posts. All of this free information is out there to help you. So that excuse of, man, I didn't learn this in school needs to go away, because there is so much information out there that is free. And then, yes, if you have specific questions about your specific situation where you need specific help, seeking out a counselor, seeking out a financial advisor is a great investment. It really is.
Yeah. Especially nowadays, there is just a Google search and you can find so much free information. You have to do it yourself. You have to put your mind to it and do the research, but it is out there and there's tons of free information, like you said.
Absolutely. It all starts with asking the right question. Even with Google, it's like, what is the question that I need to ask? Can I ask this question better? You know, and Google has gotten so smart that once we start asking the question in a better way, that we really find that drilled down answer.
Yeah, exactly. You can find exactly what you're looking for. You just have to look for it yourself, which is, tricky sometimes for people to seek out information on their own, but it is definitely out there. There's tons of free resources. So when people are building generational wealth for their family, is there anything that's commonly overlooked?
I would say one thing that's commonly overlooked is that, hey, if I am providing them with enough money and assets, then they're just going to be fine. But I would say really, in my opinion, I would say your time, your knowledge, your experience, you walking them through that financial journey on their way to adulthood is much more valuable than any assets, stocks, houses, whatever you could provide them down the road. I think they're looking for mom and dad and that example, and to show them how to do this walk.
Yeah. So definitely have that conversation with your kids, right? About, what you've left for them and what exactly it means for them and everything like that.
Especially while you're still here on Earth. So
right.
Exactly. If this is a conversation for people who are, later on in their years and they're saying, well, I'm going to take care of them by leaving them lots of stuff. That's great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I think that's beautiful.
Right.
But if you're able to allow them to experience some of that joy while you're here and show them how to use it responsibly, consider that. Consider that you don't have to die and then they get the gift.
Right.
Why not let them experience it with you here while you're around, and you can show them how to responsibly use it.
Yeah, Andy, I couldn't agree with that more, especially, it's so great to set up your generational wealth, but show them how it should be used. So then that keeps building generational wealth for their kids and their kids and their kids. So I think that's very important to note. So what documents need to be completed to protect your generational wealth?
Yeah, I would say, starting off, if a lot of people don't have a will. So I think just starting off with a simple will is a great place to start. As you start to build up more assets, looking into a trust and all that goes into that is a great place to look into too. Sometimes people think that, oh man, I'll get a will when I'm rich or something later on. Really, you need to get a will as soon as you have other people in your life and you want to have some sort of direction of where your assets or even the protection of your children is going to go. Because in your will, you can designate who's going to be taking care of my kids. How is this all going to go? How do I even want my final after I've died? How do I want my funeral to go? How do I want my celebration to go? These all go in a will. So I think things like a will and then eventually a trust as you move towards building those assets up is a really smart thing to do. This doesn't need to be overly expensive, overly complicated. There are great online services. If your situation's not too complicated, you can look into Trust and Will is a fantastic organization that takes care of that a lot for people at a less expensive cost. Now, if you have a more complicated financial situation, I would highly recommend looking into a trusted lawyer that can help you figure out the best way to set up your estate plan.
Yeah, that's such a good point. Definitely have a will and a trust ready, especially if you have kids and such. It's very important to have a will then.
Absolutely.
Right. So how can you integrate your generational wealth planning into your monthly or yearly budget and your long-term financial plan?
Yeah, I would say sometimes parents get a little carried away with this, saying, "Hey, wow, if I take care of my kids, they're going to be much better off than I was." And they put too much emphasis on the 529 planning or investing for their kids or putting all of their money into kids' activities, but they're not planning for their own retirement or they're not planning for their own future. So that when they get older, they're going to now have to look to their kids to say, "Hey, can I move back in with you? Because I don't have enough money for my retirement." So really, you need to take care of your own situation first. You need to take care of your own retirement. And then once you're looking forward in the future and you say, "Wow, okay, with compound interest, this is going to build up to be plenty for us to retire on. We're going to be comfortable, whatever. I've got a pension. I've got this money set aside." Once you're in a really comfortable position financially, then look towards what can I do to financially help my kids get a better leg up in life, whether that's investing for their 529, maybe investing in a kids brokerage account while they're young so that maybe they have enough for their first home down payment, by the time they're 30, something like that. Looking into different investment options like that can really help them to, not go through this student debt crisis that we're in, have a leg up in this really competitive home housing market. But really, if you're not able to do any of those investment things, that's okay. Equip them with the financial knowledge so that they can take care of it themselves after they finish school and they build up their own money. And that way they're empowered and then they become more independent with their money.
Yeah, I think passing on financial literacy knowledge is just as important as physical money wealth, right? For building generational wealth.
Agree. Yes.
Yeah. And I love how you keep bringing up compound interest because it's such an important thing that many people don't even think about. And we have a bunch of blogs about that. So I will put them in the link of this bio of this podcast as well, so people can get that there. So I guess we kind of talked about this throughout the entire podcast, but how do you go about passing on your generational wealth that you've built?
Yeah, I would say passing it on really starts with knowledge first. I would say making sure you're taking the time to teach your kids how to be independent and grow their own wealth and grow their own money is a great place to start. Once you feel like you've done that in a really good way, yes, you can look towards future goals. We'll call it, midterm goals for them, whether that's college, buying their own house, maybe having that gap year in between school or after school. What can we do to build up assets to get to them to that point? And yes, they can contribute to that as well. So it doesn't just have to be mom and dad, plunking down money so that they can have a better life. Kids need to understand the importance of investing and saving for the future so that with a portion of their paycheck in high school or, their paycheck for their first internship, they're throwing money towards those investment goals as well so that they can have a great future. So equipping them with that knowledge and then having them put that knowledge into practice through saving and investing goals, and then, being a part of it and showing them that you care and you want them to have that better life is a great place to start with generational wealth.
Yeah, I think that's so important to teach them while they're young to save money, because even nowadays, people my age, millennials, they might not have any savings still. So I think it's so important to start teaching your kids young about that stuff. So it's estimated that 70% of families will lose their wealth in the second generation and when 90% lose in the third. We talked about this a little bit earlier. So how can that be prevented?
Yeah, I would say the first place to start with preventing just sort of the loss of this wealth is allowing your kids to learn what it means to be a good steward of that money. So letting them play with a little bit of money early on in their life so that they can make mistakes with it, right? Because it's easier to make mistakes with $50 at whatever called 13 years old than $50,000 at 33 years old when you've made this big investing mistake or this housing blunder. So making mistakes and having trial and error early on in life is a good thing, and it needs to be encouraged so that kids understand the power that comes with money, and by making those mistakes, they're learning early how they want to craft their life. Because we can talk all day long about the things they should do, right? But people, I mean, you know this, Katie, you and I do this all the time. I will remember the lessons where I really messed up on something.
Yeah.
And so if kids have the opportunity to really mess up on something or learn from something or really have a positive experience with money, then they're going to remember that. And especially if they had a part in it. But when mom and dad are saying, hey, you should do this, you should do that, they're probably going to ignore most of those things, but they're going to remember those lessons that they had early on in life. So I would say empower them, give them a little bit of money as they're younger, and then start to grow that knowledge so that they can learn and do some trial and error. And so when they are adults, that they've gotten those lessons, and they won't be as apt to blow that money and lose that generational wealth.
Yeah, exactly. I think like in every aspect of life, learning from your mistakes really like sits with you. You remember those mistakes more than anything, and you won't do it again.
Absolutely. I remember a lot of mine.
Yeah, so do I. I just had like some flush through my head right now when you were saying that. So you definitely learn from your mistakes and, having the real money. And then also like the value of money. When it's your money you're spending, it's a completely different thing than when it's your parents' money you're spending.
Absolutely.
It feels so different to spend your own hardworking money. So that's so important to have them, have their own money and like learn from their mistakes and everything. So I think that's the ends of my questions. Thank you so much for talking with me today about building generational wealth. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
No, Katie, I really appreciate being on your show. I think what you guys are doing here with Navicor and the show is fantastic. I really love your empowering stories that you have on here where people are making some major change, whether it's really early on in their life with debt and everything like that, so that they can build generational wealth down the road. And I think it's very, very exciting. I talk about this on my podcast, Marriage, Kids, and Money. So if people want to check that out or go to my website, marriagekidsandmoney.com, I love having these types of conversations, and I appreciate you having me on to talk about it today.
Yeah, of course. I'm going to link your podcast and your website in the description of this podcast so people can get it right there. And thank you again for taking the time out of your day to talk to me. I enjoyed our conversation so much.
Thanks so much, Katie. I appreciate it.
All right. Thank you. If you haven't started building generational wealth for your family, this interview provided some great tips on how to start building and keep the wealth going for your family. If you don't have the funds to build generational wealth, building generational wealth by teaching your kids financial literacy is just as important. Financial literacy is key to maintaining your generational wealth for many generations that follow you. If you do have the funds, investing in your child's education will help build generational wealth. By helping provide an education for your child, you're teaching them personal independence and empowering them financially. Have a conversation with your children about the generational wealth they'll inherit one day. As Andy said, you can leave them just money, but it would be more valuable to have a conversation about what you're leaving and how you'd like them to take care of the wealth you're leaving. It's also important to have a conversation with your children about your family's generational wealth so your family's wealth isn't lost. Let your kids learn from their own mistakes. You can try to tell them about money mistakes they can make, but they'll learn better from making mistakes themselves. This will teach them how to handle their wealth in the future. With that being said, that wraps up another episode of Millennial Debt Domination. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast wherever you're listening. And if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please rate and review us there. I'll talk to you next time, Millennials, Gen Zers, and everyone else listening. Bye.